Hey there. I had the chance to talk to Anna Collard from Know Before Africa. I actually met Anna several years ago when I was an analyst at Gartner Research and I covered the security awareness space. Uh, Anna was the founder of a security awareness company called Popcorn Training out of Africa, and I was always impressed with her creativity, her passion, and just the way that she approached the discipline. About 3 years ago, Know Before purchased Popcorn Training, and I now get to work with Anna directly, which is an honor. So, what I wanted to do today is bring her on. We're going to talk through three different Africa centric reports that I think are going to be very interesting, whether you live in Africa or not. So, we're going to talk about privacy, we'll talk about security, we'll talk about mobile, and then, really importantly, especially since we're recording this on International Women's Day, we're going to talk about diversity of the workforce and the need to have different perspectives, specifically women, within cybersecurity. So, what are the barriers, and then what do we need to do to overcome those barriers, and where does hope come from? So, with that, I'm going to go to the interview in progress. I will warn you, there's a couple audio glitches that were coming from my side, which is why I've switched to this microphone instead of the one that I was using during the interview.
I've been in security for about 20 years. Before I founded Popcorn, I was a security consultant and an architect. And I think from a very young age, I've always been, not necessarily interested in cybersecurity because I didn't know about it when I was much younger, but I was always interested in creating content that will explain concepts that are complicated to some in a simple way so that it can be explained to others.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that's really one of the things that drew me to Popcorn. I first saw Popcorn when I was a Gartner analyst working in this market and reached out to you, and we spoke a few times. And you were always one of the vendors that I admired, and your approach to the market, your approach to training and creating that content that really just explains complicated topics in uncomplicated ways so that people can actually understand what they're seeing and care about it. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for being part of the team here at Know Before. I want to give you a chance to talk about some of the research that you've been doing recently. So we've got three reports with us. One of those is mobile users in Africa. Can you give us a little bit of an idea on number one, why you wanted to take on that research, and then some of the critical findings were that you want to bring to us?
Yeah, so I think the first reason why we're trying to go out and do some research in Africa is because there isn't enough data available on the continent. And it's always interesting to compare what we find here locally to, let's say, research data that's been obtained in Europe or the States. And the mobile user, or specifically the mobile privacy concerns that we've looked at now just in February, was spurred by the whole WhatsApp debate and WhatsApp changing their privacy policy. And you need to know that in Africa, WhatsApp is the major or the main communication tool, whether that's in private use or even for business. Like, it's literally easier to get hold of people in Kenya, let's say, via WhatsApp than to use email. And what we wanted to know is, because obviously this privacy policy that WhatsApp issued or is about to issue caused a huge stir on social media. And we wanted to know, okay, well, in a way, it's actually great because it creates more awareness around privacy in general, and with that also on data security and data protection. So we wanted to know, what do the users on the ground, what do the people in Africa think about this? And would it change their behavior when it comes to using chat applications such as WhatsApp and general mobile use behavior? So we went out and interviewed, I think it's about 770 users, most of which, or 99% of which, have smartphones, or, obviously you need to have a phone to run WhatsApp on. And then we just asked them a couple of questions. One of them being, are you concerned about the imminent privacy change? And what was interesting is that compared to previous research that we've conducted, the concern level, at least the people that joined this time, said that they were more concerned about their privacy or their online digital identity compared to previous surveys. So that's, thanks Mark Zuckerberg in a way, because that whole debate really caused some discussion and more awareness. So that's a good thing, right? But then at the same time, they also asked, okay, well, you admit you're concerned about your privacy. That's great. Are you willing to do something about that? And again, the data there is quite interesting in that I think only 11% across all the African participants said that they would actually consider, canceling their WhatsApp subscription or moving over to another chat app. In South Africa, interestingly enough, that was the only country where 15% said that they have already left WhatsApp, or they're thinking about leaving WhatsApp or planning about leaving WhatsApp and using one of the alternative methods. What was also quite interesting is we asked them, just does your company currently have a policy in place? How do you, from a work point of view, how does your company regulate, or is there like a policy that controls what you can and can't share on WhatsApp? And only 24% of the respondents said that they actually have a policy in place that does say they're not allowed to share sensitive data via WhatsApp or sensitive work data. And now you need to remember that on the previous report or survey that we did, nearly 90% of the respondents, or I think it was like 85%, said that they are currently using WhatsApp for work. So it really is a tool that's being used not just for our friends and families, but for work. So yeah, I thought that was quite interesting. The other finding that I thought was really fascinating is that on the one hand side, yes, it raised a level of awareness, it raised concerns, but the majority of the people said, okay, we are concerned about it, but we're not going to move off WhatsApp, or we may install another alternative like Telegram or Signal, were the most sort of dominant ones, but we will stay on both chat apps. And then lastly, I think what was really interesting is the number one alternative messaging app that came up was Facebook Messenger. Now, if you are if you're concerned about your privacy on WhatsApp, you should not be on Facebook Messenger, because that's much worse in
Yeah.
terms of data collection.
Do you think that the respondents understood that it was all the same company and that there's even more and more integration between those platforms all the time?
I think that is the problem, Perry, is that even with the social media hype that was caused by that, there's a lot of misinformation. Like there were, comments made, WhatsApp or Facebook is starting to read my content. I mean, nowhere in the privacy policy do they say that they will read the content. It's more about the sharing of metadata and things like your calendar book. That's really sensitive. Like I wouldn't want that to be shared with Facebook, but they're not going to look inside the actual messaging content itself. And people were hoping on about that particular point. So there is a level of misinformation and just misunderstanding, I guess, around the general issue and what privacy really means, what security means, what encryption means. So there's a lot of work still to be done to educate everybody really on the actual issues and the implications.
Yeah, and I think that that's a huge point of consideration here. The other thing for those of us in North America, I do think you bring up a really important point to think about, which is that WhatsApp use is ubiquitous throughout the continent of Africa. It's not something that is like it is here, where it's one choice out of many, and people tend to standardize like on FaceTime or Facebook Messenger. In Africa, it is a critical form of communication that people feel like they cannot live without, and so the concerns there are really, I think, reach an inflection point when you think about that.
So much so that even some of the sort of government to citizen communication processes or tools are based on WhatsApp technology.
Yeah, it's I think as ubiquitous as SMS text messaging is in much of the world. All right, let's move on to a couple of these other reports. Now, one of the other ones that you brought is this 2020
African Cybersecurity Research Report. Can you give us an idea of what that's about and some data out of that that you'd like to share?
I think the main message again is very similar to the previous one I referred to. So what we do once a year in November, we reach out and we poll or survey just over 800 respondents across 8 African countries. And we just try to measure what is the state on the ground in terms of overall security awareness. And what's good is that compared to the 2019 study, the awareness level has increased, and also some of the, we call them like the qualifying questions, have improved. But again, what the main sort of story around that is, and there you see the WhatsApp story again for work. The main message here is that we're dealing still with quite a big level of unconscious incompetence. So people, for example, respond and say they are concerned about cybercrime, which is good, or they respond and say, I think over 50% responded and said, I would recognize a cyber incident if I saw one. Now, I've been working in security for 20 years. I would not say that because I know how stealthy it can be, right? But then, in the same time, so at the same time, when people say they are confident they would recognize a cyber incident, or a breach of sorts, they then are not, and at least in 2019, 65% of the respondents, last year it was just over 50% of the respondents, didn't know what ransomware was. They didn't know what two-factor authentication was, or they chose the sort of the wrong answers to that. So again, it's just a repeat message that we need to do more to address that unconscious incompetence, like showing people what they don't know that they don't know yet.
Yeah, and I think that that's critical. That's a big task, though, and I think that one of the things that everybody around the world should be thinking about is uh, with adults, there's a mindset shift that we have to create. With the younger generation, though, we can start to build that in as much as possible. And I think working through early education is going to be critical to get us to a better place in the next generation as we try to re-educate ourselves and our current generations right now. In honor of International Women's Day, I do want to make sure that we get to the Cyber Heroines report. So why don't you frame that for us and talk through a little bit of the data that came out of that? What really fueled your passion to be a part of that report and to spin that up? And then what are the things that, probably two things, what were you most encouraged about? And then what would you like to see change in the future?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the points I raised earlier on sort of feed into this quite nicely. So we're dealing with like Africa being on the map now for cyber criminals as an emerging economy that's growing in terms of mobile connectivity, mobile financial transactions. We also have a massive skill shortage on the continent when it comes to security skills in general. And then, like anywhere in the world, we don't have enough women or girls in the security industry. I mean, in the States, I believe it's 20% of the professionals, security professionals that are female. In Africa, it's just 9%. So one way, on the one hand side, that we can sort of address the urgent need to have more security professionals on the continent. At the same time, we're dealing with a huge sort of youth unemployment issue everywhere on the continent. If we look at that as an opportunity and sort of attract more females and girls to join the cybersecurity industry, I see something that could be quite magical. So that's why, that sort of spurred us into doing a survey again. And it went out to about 450 teachers across the continent. And what we wanted to find out from them was, okay, if we were to do something about attracting girls to join the tech and the cybersecurity industry, what are the challenges that they see on the ground? And what is it that prevents girls in the first place from coming or from joining the industry? And, you know, if you again look at it from an African perspective, there's a couple of really interesting challenges. The one being we obviously have an infrastructure challenge. You know, 40% of Africans don't have access to electricity or internet. Some of them not even running water. You know, that is unfortunately still a reality in some of the poorer areas. So if you look at what the teacher said is in terms of you know, like internet access, I think one of the graphs does show it quite nicely. Like only 36% of the students currently do have, just, yeah, there we go. Like 36% have access to the internet, 25% have access to the internet at school, and then 37% don't have any access to the internet. So that's a challenge that we need to keep in mind if we want to address the problem. So the other thing that's interesting is when we looked at you know, in terms of women and sort of gender imbalance in terms of digital connectivity, African women are a quarter less likely to be online compared to the men. Why is that? You know, and that in itself, like, if, as a bigger sort of issue, if we and Africa and like I guess all the countries in the world is on that whole sort of fourth industrial revolution and digitization trend, we cannot afford to let the woman or leave the woman behind on that. So so we looked at, okay, what are some of the reasons why the girls are not joining the industry? And again, I think that could be something that's global, because it starts at early childhood development, where we unconsciously create these biases that girls are not made for tech, or we consciously discriminate. But I think in the majority of cases, this happens really unconsciously in society. So that's something that, as a parent, you know, we have to be so aware of and stop doing, or consciously like work against that. And I always use that example. Even in my case, I have a young girl and a young boy, and if we go into the toy shop, the cool stuff is in the boys section, and then the unicorns and the dolly makeup is in the girls section. And that's not cool. I mean, I have nothing against unicorns, but I also want my girl to be exposed to like experiments and just make it more attractive. And I think one of the main things that came out of the report, which I found really interesting, the teachers said that, you know, apart from sort of making tech or security more sexy in a way and showing girls that you can be very much female and be in tech, to sort of, you know, destroy that preconceived notion that you have to be like a geek in a hoodie. There's also another thing that we need to address, which is like the fear of math. A lot of girls think if you end up in tech, you need to be good in math, which, I mean, it doesn't hurt if you're good in math, but you don't have to necessarily be good in math to end up in tech. And then the sort of the majority of the teachers actually said to us, and that I found was the most interesting thing, because it's something we can easily do something about, is they said there aren't enough role models, and we need to create role models of existing African women in the industry that can be shared with those girls, preferably via videos that the teachers can show in the classroom, because, you know, obviously for the ones who have internet access, that could be shared online, but just something tangible we can share with the teachers that shows, hey, this is a cool African woman. She's very much maybe a fashionista or whatever. That is really cool and girly, yet she's a trailblazer in the security industry. And that is something we started doing, like identifying cool African ladies that we can sort of interview, create little mini video clips, and then share that with the school network. And hopefully, you know, inspire a few young girls to choose cybersecurity as a potential career path.
So I think that's an amazing report, and it's a great one to end off on. So Anna, thank you so much for making time for us today and sharing your wisdom and kind of the fruit of these three great reports. And I really thank you for that, and look forward to seeing what you're going to come out with next.